A bit of a trigger warning here. This segment is about photos that depict violence, dead people, and tragedy. If you are bothered by historic photos of violence, dead people, and tragedy, please don't watch. You can listen. I'm going to talk about those things. But if you don't want to see the images, don't watch. Those of you still with me, let's talk about this famous image. Those seeking to dunk on the Texas Rangers always throw down this photo as sort of a trump card. This is especially true of anti-Ranger scholars like Refusing to Forget. Let's get Refusing to Forget co-founder John Moran Gonzalez's take on this infamous image.
None of these men were in that firefight. Let me repeat, none of these men were in that firefight. Neither the Rangers nor their victims, right? These four men just happened to be ethnic Mexican in the neighborhood.
Okay, so while it is true that the Texas Rangers were not there for the firefight with the Raiders, he stresses the dead men pictured didn't have a hand in the raid. They just happened to be in the neighborhood of the distant ranch house. He bases this statement on what?
You know, if you think about it, the sediciosos were rancheros. They knew, first of all, the reputation of the Rangers towards Mexicans, and two, they knew the brush country like the back of their hand. They're not going to be hanging around to be captured by the Rangers. They disappeared into the brush.
Oh, so the scholarly reason is they were just random guys in the area because real lawbreakers would know how to hide?
But, like I said, any Mexican was a bandit and a sedicioso. And so these four unfortunate men just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time with the Rangers.
Well, that is technically true. They just happened to be part of an armed raiding party that attacked the Norias Division of the King Ranch in August 1915, and that would be the wrong place and the wrong time. Between 10 and 12 raiders flying the banner of the genocidal plan of San Diego were killed in the raid or died later as a result of wounds sustained in it. Since claims of racial violence are the reason Dr. Gonzalez offers up this photo in the first place, I should note here that some of the wounds inflicted on those dead raiders were made by shots fired by Hispanic employees of the King Ranch. First-hand accounts of the raid are supplied to us by Anglo and Hispanic witnesses, and they tell us that the men were Plan of San Diego raiders, that some were killed and then the rest fled to regroup. Okay, so what else does Dr. Gonzalez want his audience to know about this infamous photograph?
This photo is, in a certain perverse sense, extremely aesthetic. And what do I mean by that? It's extremely composed. As you can see, there are very strong diagonal lines, right, like that. That suggested, composition, that these bodies were dragged.
This photo is one of a series shot by a professional photographer. Dr. Gonzalez knows that, so it's weird that he highlights how extremely composed it is, but doesn't tell his audience why it's so well composed. Actually, it's not weird, it's dishonest. He says the photos suggest that the bodies were dragged. There is no suggestion. We know the bodies were being dragged from near the Norias ranch house where the raid took place to their place of burial the day following the raid. Does Dr. Gonzalez imagine that 10 or 12 dead men with all of the dead weight that entails would be carried by other men to the site of their burial? Perhaps he'd have preferred wheelbarrows be employed? That's neither here nor there. What matters is that this is not information Dr. Gonzalez lacks. It's information he chooses not to give his audience and not to give to you, the public.
And essentially is all about sending the message, this is what happened to you, if you at all challenge the kind of social power structure that is getting put into place at this time.
This shtick about the purpose of this photo being to send a message about social power structures. Since the men were asked by a commercial photographer to pose with the bodies and then in the other photos that are in the series, they're asked to pose with the battle flag of the Plan of San Diego. Do you really think the intent was to send a message about hierarchies and hegemony? photographer was Robert Runyon, a man that moved to Brownsville about 1910, and he opened a photography studio. He was married into the Matamoros Medrano family. And in addition to his portrait studio, he traveled around the valley and documented the Mexican Revolution in the valley using photographs. He took shots of troops amassed on the border. He took pictures of flowers, of vistas, of children, of Fort Brown, of farmers. He even traveled into Monterrey with the Mexican Constitutionalist Army, and he photographed all of that. And he took photos the day after the Norias raid and of the wreckage after the Omito train derailment in October. Dr. Gonzalez is a native of Brownsville. Pretty sure he's aware who took the photo and how much of life in the valley during the revolution was documented by Robert Runyon's photographs. And if he wasn't aware of it before, he is now.
I'll just say this image was a postcard that circulated for the next 2 decades throughout Texas, right? And you just have to imagine the degree to which this type of racial violence was normalized in order for that to make its circulation as a postcard possible, right? Just think about it. Somebody had to go to the general store, look through the postcards, pick this one out, write a message to a friend or family on the backside, put a stamp on it, mail it, have it go through the system, have it received at the end of by the receiver, who would look at it, read the message, look at the photo, and then put it on the fridge or, pin it up or, put it away in a drawer or something. But the thing is that this is the degree of racial violence that was needed and accepted as simply necessary to maintain and establish white supremacy in South Texas at this time.
I'm not sure if this is dishonesty or just ignorance, but man, oh man, Dr. Gonzalez is wrong in assuming photo postcards only applied to his narrow area of racialized interest and served to perpetuate white supremacy. So here is a quick primer for him and for all of y'all who may not know. Robert Runyon sold some of the images he took because that was in fact how he earned his living. He had a family to support. In many ways, he was a war correspondent. He licensed photographs to newspapers. He sold images to postcard companies. At that time, and for a long time afterward, photo postcards were a big deal. They allowed people around the world to see, with photographic clarity, things that they'd only read about before. Photo postcards of hurricane catastrophes, of lynchings, of executed prisoners, men killed in war, floods, train accidents, burn victims. There was a ready market for all of those things and more, not just in the United States, worldwide. Hell, there is still a segment of the population that collects historical post-mortem images. And just because we've evolved out of postcards doesn't mean we can't understand the reason catastrophe cards existed. There was a huge market for catastrophe photos for the same reason we rubberneck when we pass an accident or binge watch true crime shows. The aphorism, "It's like watching a train wreck, I can't look away," that was born out of our sense of morbid curiosity. That's what made people buy those cards. Maybe Dr. Gonzalez doesn't understand, but his ignorance is not an excuse for attributing to white supremacy that which can be explained by basic knowledge of 20th century material culture. When refusing to forget and others present this photo without the context of the photographer who took it, without acknowledging that the dead men were killed in a battle that they initiated, and without a nod to prevailing material culture, they're engaging in intellectual dishonesty and, frankly, desperation. But now you know the story of this infamous photo.